Hello, I'm Jim Paxon. This week on Arizona Wildlife Views, you'll see a grand experiment on our most famous river and see some of the wildlife that live near its banks. Then we'll cowboy up for winter range. All that and more on Arizona Wildlife Views.
Arizona Wildlife Views is brought to you by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and the Heritage Fund, lottery dollars working for wildlife. Some projects made possible by the Sport Fish and Wildlife Restoration Fund.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Wildlife Views. Tonight we'll take you to the Colorado River to see what's being done to protect this most important resource. Then you'll get an up-close and personal look at some of the wildlife that depend on this river's life-sustaining waters.
These are exciting and historic times for the Colorado River.
November 19, 2012. Speaking at Glen Canyon Dam in northern Arizona, then Secretary of the Interior Ken Salazar set the stage for a grand experiment years in the making.
We will be marking an era in which America realizes that the goals of water delivery, water storage, and hydropower production are compatible with and supportive of management and protection of the Grand Canyon. And we will witness the awesome power of this river.
With the pull of a lever, Salazar released a torrent of water from giant pipes near the base of the dam.
The water will increase until a maximum release of approximately 42,300 cubic feet per second is reached.
That's more than 4 times faster than the river was running just days before this high-flow experiment began. Rushing and roaring out of Lake Powell, the water crashed into the river channel on its way to and through Grand Canyon.
We didn't always recognize that these high-flow events, these pulse flows, were beneficial to the river environment downstream. That was one of the breakthroughs of the 1980s and 1990s, was that recognition.
The high flow was intended to take advantage of recent storms that washed sediment from tributaries into the main stem Colorado River miles below the dam. The goal is to flush that sediment downriver into the Grand Canyon to restore beaches for camping and habitat for wildlife.
We will send 500,000 metric tons of sediment downstream, enough sediment to fill a football field 230 feet deep.
Sediment distribution wasn't an issue here before the mid-1960s. That's when Glen Canyon Dam started storing water and producing power for growing western states like Arizona.
And it's created a huge recreation economy around Lake Powell, the Lee's Ferry fishery, and the areas around the lake and the dam. But this dam has also unquestionably had adverse impacts. The lake traps the sediment that used to course down the river, that red sediment that gave this river its name. The regulation of flows has had an impact on vegetation, on beaches, on wildlife habitat. And the colder temperature of the water has altered the aquatic ecosystem.
For better and for worse, Glen Canyon Dam changed the Colorado River.
Something that was not completely understood at the time was this would become a cold, clear tailwater below this high dam. Cold, clear tailwaters at the time were viewed as unique opportunities to create tailwater trout fisheries. And as a result, one of the things that evolved from the creation of Glen Canyon Dam was the establishment of the tailwater trout fishery that we refer to as Lee's Ferry.
It's a trophy trout fishery that spans the first 16 miles of river below Glen Canyon Dam.
The Game and Fish Department has managed, in partnership with the Park Service and with the Bureau of Reclamation, this trout fishery since its inception. Now, our interests in terms of the operation of the river have a lot to do with certainly the recreational draw that a tailwater trout fishery provides, but also the fish and wildlife habitat associated with the Colorado River in Glen Canyon and farther downstream in Grand Canyon.
Arizona Game and Fish is especially interested in habitat about 62 river miles below Lee's Ferry.
As you see the Little Colorado River entering into the main stem, just downstream of here is the largest aggregation of humpback chub in Grand Canyon.
The humpback chub is an endangered native fish. It was on the federal government's very first list of endangered species back in 1967. It needed that protection after Glen Canyon Dam reset the thermostat on the Colorado River. The cold, clear water that courses through Glen Canyon Dam from the depths of Lake Powell is great for trout, but not so great for native fish like the humpback chub.
You can really tell the size of the hump on this.
It prefers warmer waters that existed before the dam when the Colorado River flowed freely.
These native fish that adapted to warm water temperatures now are living in an area, at least in the main stem Colorado River, where it's much cooler than they're used to. And that can affect their growth, their reproduction, and just the ability for them to live.
Monsters!
Arizona Game and Fish, in partnership with the U.S. Geological Survey and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, has been closely monitoring the status of the species since 1987. Using large hoop nets placed in the Little Colorado River not far from the confluence, researchers capture native fish, tag them with a microchip for future identification, and record their individual characteristics.
We can go back to our fish database and we're able to know the last time it's been caught and then also where it's moved from.
If we see that the population is in severe decline, then we may need to take management actions to find ways to increase the population overall.
But the welfare of native fish and the conservation of sediment didn't get much consideration in the early days of operating Glen Canyon Dam. Back then, the Bureau of Reclamation ran the dam to maximize power production and optimize water delivery. As a result, flows fluctuated wildly, up and down like a roller coaster, and the river ecosystem held on for the ride.
And river scientists recognize that in order to maintain the ecosystem, we have to reestablish some of the natural processes in the river.
In 1992, Congress passed the Grand Canyon Protection Act, directing the Bureau to operate the dam in a manner that protects the Grand Canyon environment. Ever since then, scientists have been searching for the best way to achieve that goal. They implemented and analyzed various flow regimes, including 3 high-flow events that took place in 1996, 2004, and 2008.
We've learned a lot from those events. We've learned what conditions we need to have to make them beneficial, how long to do them, when to do them.
That scientific knowledge is the basis of the new experimental high-flow protocol that started with the 2012 high-flow event and continues through the year 2020. It's a recipe for routine high flows whenever sediment conditions are ripe.
And so we now have the ability to react when there are rainstorms and monsoons that bring that sediment into the main stem of the river.
You know, sometimes if you just leave Mother Nature alone, she takes care of herself. And I think that, you know, through all of this manipulation and experimentation, that they can literally create more chaos than anything else, my personal opinion.
Terry Gunn's opinion is formed by 30 years as a fishing guide on the Colorado River. Owner of the Lee's Ferry Anglers Guide Service since 1988, he says high-flow events are bad for business.
Oh, it's not good for business. Absolutely no. I mean, it's terrible for business.
Gunn says people get the wrong idea that high flows decimate the fishery.
Every time they conduct one of these flows, I get emails, I get letters, we get phone calls. Sorry, they're destroying your fishery again. I mean, when are they going to stop experimenting with this fishery?
He takes issue with the latest experimental protocol that started with a high flow in November.
And there is nothing natural about a flood event here in the wintertime.
Gunn says springtime floods make more sense, but he also says high flow events are rarely good for Lee's Ferry because so little sediment enters that first 16 miles of river below the dam.
I think that at some point in time that they might realize this whole theory is flawed. I mean, every time that they've done one of these experimental flows, there have been environmental impacts that we've seen here to the trout fishery and to the resource here at Lee's Ferry. You know, the sand is disappearing, the gravel bars are disappearing, and they're being sent downriver.
I got a fish.
On the other hand, fishing at Lee's Ferry is really good. According to Game and Fish data, the catch rate for 2012 was almost 2 fish an hour. That's the highest average since the late 90s, and it's been trending upward since 2008. There was a high flow event that year, and research suggests it produced good results for trout.
So there's some really strong data at Lee's Ferry, which is just below Glen Canyon Dam, that suggests that the 2008 spring flood event triggered an increase in abundance of midges and black flies.
Game and fish biologist Aaron Bunch says scientists believe the 2008 high flow cleared muck and algae from gravel on the river bottom, improving habitat for the production of both insects and trout.
It was the largest number of trout on record to date in 2008.
You know, it was one of those things, was it really the flow or was it just the timing? It was really hard to say. That was the year that they ran a springtime flow. I think that the fish thought it was a spring freshet and it was time to spawn. Yeah, I mean, we had a really super prolific spawn, but that year we needed a prolific spawn. The fish knew that too.
Whatever the reason, the trout population soared in 2008, resulting in more fish competing for food with the endangered humpback chub.
Another humpback chub? One of the big looming questions out there is really, what contribution does the rainbow trout population, how are they impacting humpback chub populations overall?
For years, scientists have been concerned about non-native trout preying on young native fish like the humpback chub. The good news is that as of 2013, the populations of both species are on the rise.
The current humpback chub population is higher than it's been any time in decades. And the trout population, the rainbow trout population, both in Glen Canyon and Marble Canyon, is also high. So that kind of tells me that the trout really isn't having much of an influence on the humpback chub and their population.
As a fisheries biologist, there's always a balancing act between creating recreational fisheries for sportsmen and maintaining and conserving important native fish populations. And that's probably the absolute hardest job that we have. So right now, the current situation is ideal because we have good fishing and really good native fish populations. Only time will tell if that goes out of balance.
Balancing the flows from Glen Canyon Dam to please every interest, fishing and recreation, wildlife and habitat, water and energy is a tremendous challenge. It's been said that a rising tide lifts all boats, but that's not necessarily true when it comes to the Colorado River. And until scientists figure out how to better mimic Mother Nature, the river community may just have to go with the flow, however tranquil or turbulent it may be.
Hoover Dam. Implanted within the Black Mountains of northwestern Arizona, it is surrounded by some incredibly rough terrain. With only half an inch of rainfall annually and scarce vegetation, this land would be inhospitable to most creatures. But it's exactly where you'll find one of the largest populations of desert bighorn sheep on the planet. The area surrounding the dam is the perfect place to see these creatures in their native habitat. And that's exactly what these adventurous people are about to do. Each summer, guides from the Arizona Game and Fish Office in Kingman launch several boats full of guests onto the Colorado in search of desert bighorn sheep. Starting at Willow Beach, the workshop takes 49 participants up the river to the base of the Hoover Dam and then returns back to the dock in the afternoon.
Oh, we rent 5 boats, and we have what we call a spotter, which is one of our wildlife managers who patrols this area. He goes out in his law enforcement boat, and he serves as a spotter. He goes ahead of the pack and looks for sheep, and if he finds them, he calls us all on the radio, directs us where to go, and all the boats get to go in and have their opportunity for a really good, watchable wildlife viewing opportunity.
And it's not long before the first sheep of the day is spotted.
Guess is, he's just already drank. He has a good drink of water.
And there are several more close by.
One of them's getting ready to jump, but thinking about it. It's so much fun to watch, especially you get to watch lambs. They're very playful. They're out here in the blacks right now, and they run around, they'll jump. And to see where they're jumping from ledge to ledge, you know, at such a young age, that's impressive as well. And the ewes are really never very far from those lambs. We're not here to give a pleasure cruise. We're here to educate the public. And we talk about sheep behavior, and one of them, of course, is coming down to the river. And unlike, you know, one of the things we talk about is like cats and dogs. You watch them and relate to them as they lap up water with their tongues. Well, sheep don't do this. They come down to the river and they'll be real skinny, and they don't lap up water. They shove their entire muzzle into the water and they suck up water. And they can drink up to 4.5 gallons of water in just 2 minutes. And that's how they recover quickly from a dehydrated state. And maybe a lot of people don't know this, but sheep, we all relate camels as a desert animal, but desert bighorn sheep can lose more body weight in water than a camel and still survive. And part of that is how they can recover very quickly from that dehydrated state. So it's a lot of fun to watch them. And as they drink, they come down and they're like this, and then they drink. It's like watching a balloon blow up. They do, and the whole stomach blows out, and it's it's a lot of fun to watch. We try and make other stops during the sheep workshop. One of them is there's a lot of hot springs throughout the Black Mountains. And one area of during the sheep workshop, as you approach the Hoover Dam area, there's a little waterfall that comes out, and it comes out from a hot spring and drops down, and the water coming down that waterfall is running about 80 to 90 degrees.
At the halfway point, the workshop stops at the Hoover Dam for a view relatively few people get to see.
When you drive, go to the Hoover Dam and you look from it down, that's one vision. When you see it from the bottom looking up, you kind of go, wow, that thing is huge. This was my 21st sheep workshop that I've done, and next week will be number 22. And a lot of the information I get that I pass on to the public comes from people like Gunnar Erickson. He's a wildlife manager that runs this segment of river, so often that he's become very, very knowledgeable.
Today, I believe that they saw a little bit of rutting behavior. The rams chasing the ewes around, where they'll put their head back and they'll stick their lips out and they'll chase after a ewe a little bit. You don't see that all the time. We didn't see any of the rams butting heads today. We did get to see some lambs, probably about a 2-month-old lamb, and we saw a total of, I believe, 56 sheep today.
I'm just blown away about how amazing it was. I've seen one bighorn in the wild once, and that was like driving over the dam. And today I think we saw about 44 bighorn sheep. It was incredible. This is one of our best kept secrets, I think, our wildlife. I mean, everyone knows that we got rattlesnakes and tarantulas, but I don't think a lot of people think about bighorn sheep when they're from other areas. So I would encourage people to come up to the Black Mountains, get a boat and get out there and look. I had no idea it was so easy to see bighorn sheep.
Stand by.
Welcome to the Old West, or at least a modern version of it.
A lot of us grew up watching Roy Rogers and Hopalong Cassidy.
Where living in the past is a virtue,
shooter's choice.
Shooting straight and fast is the goal.
Any questions?
This is the 22nd annual Winter Range, the national championship of cowboy action shooting.
It's the largest Western encampment and shooting competition of this type anywhere in the world. It is coordinated by SAS, which is a single action shooting society.
It takes place each year at the Ben Avery Shooting Facility in Phoenix.
We are delighted to have access to this. We work closely with Game and Fish, who actually run the facility.
The huge outdoor venue has plenty of room for these wannabe cowboys and cowgirls to show off their stuff.
They have to shoot a particular number of targets in a particular sequence.
As per the instructions with the rifle, outside, outside, inside, inside, center. Any questions?
Using firearms typical of the Old West, they test their skills on 12 different stages built especially for the competition.
1-8-7-0, spotter sync, clean! If you miss a target like I did yesterday,
5300.
it's a 5-second penalty.
And all the spotters say clean.
Oh, that was fun.
All of that can be very simple. All of it can be a little more complicated. Woo! We don't try and make it complicated at all, but there's something in all of us that when the buzzer goes off and stuff, there's about a pint of adrenaline that dumps into your system and you go, ah!
I was just flying. I'm still shaking. I'm going, what was going on?
When the timer starts, the blasting begins. Bullets clang off metal targets, echoing sounds of success. Speed and accuracy is the name of the game, but in cowboy action shooting, looking good is almost as important as shooting good.
We are full of characters.
It's always nice to have see the cowgirls and the senoritas, but every once in a while you get a fine, beautiful Victorian lady walking by who knows how to dress and how to dress well.
Costumes are mandatory, and contestants don't use their real names. A Western alias is required.
Sonora Blaze from Colorado.
Reverend, bury him deep. I can marry you or bury you.
I saw it in a magazine and I went in and threw it on my husband's desk and said, look at this. And he said, do you want to do this? And I said, we've been married 35 years and you don't know that I want to do this? And he said, okay, and that's how we started.
We're from Canada, so...
In 2013, nearly 1,100 people from 46 states and 7 foreign countries competed in the week-long event.
Then you put it up and shoot it, and, you know...
We've got over 100 vendors selling just about everything imaginable to do with the Old West.
Yeah, 7 1/8.
I supply hair because many of these ladies, they put on beautiful clothes, but they have modern short hair. They're wearing my hair.
We also know what kind of underwear to wear because of this.
Yes.
Winter Range mixes lighthearted fun with some very serious competition.
I have a guy who lives relatively close to me. My one goal is to beat him like an old drum.
Oh yes, we love to be able to beat the men at shooting.
Girls with guns have more fun.
When they're not shooting targets, they're shooting the breeze, visiting with old friends and making new ones.
This is our time to get together and just enjoy each other's company.
Nobody's a stranger at Winter Range. It's a lot like a family reunion.
We pick on each other mercilessly, but it's all in great fun.
It's a gathering of outlaws and in-laws, a congregation of characters who share a common bond.
We all love the Old West. We like the stories of the Old West. We like the movies and the values that were there. The cowboy way is something that's very important to us. Honesty, integrity, respecting of others. We grew up with those heroes. We just can't let go of it. It's a part of who and what we are.
It's easy to get lost in the moment when she's enjoying the outdoors. This is Kristen Kyle's fish story.
It's true, you know, you can definitely lose yourself. Full immersion, I guess, is the way that I fish. And one fun evening on Silver Creek, I decided on a whim to drive up there, and I pulled in the parking lot. It must have been about 4 o'clock, so definitely enough daylight for me to get some good fishing in. And I'm just working the stream, and I just don't start to realize how dark it is and how dark it is getting until I finally release what I decide is my last fish of the day, and I let it go back in the water. And I stand up, and it's almost pitch black out. I wasn't too panicked until I turned to leave, and all I heard was, ow, 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 as the coyotes were just over the hill. So needless to say, that last half mile was a dead sprint. I think I might have set an Olympic record as I was grabbing all my gear and things like that. But, you know, always, you know, be aware of your surroundings, but absolutely, you can definitely just lose yourself in fishing. And it's just a great time to come out and relax. So I think that is a prime example of how you can let your defenses slip just a little bit too far, though.
Well, that's our show for tonight. For more information, check out our website at azgfd.gov. For the fine folks at Arizona Game and Fish, I'm Jim Paxon. We'll see you next time.